Good day everyone. I am Tamado from BS Biology to major in microbiology, and I am here to report the fourth topic of the chapter 10, specifically about parks and nature reserves. So how should we manage and sustain parks and nature reserves? Now let us define first what is park. It is an area or a plant environment that typically correlates with an open space allocated or reserved fully or partially. It could be comprises of natural elements or man-made elements or combination of both. It is also designated and protected by the government because of its natural beauty, plants, or animals, and which the public can usually visit. Let us also define what is nature reserve. It is an area set aside for the purpose of preserving both the certain animals and plants or can be both. It is also a common and strong form of protection. It is very limited to the public because it is privately owned. Here are some of the best national parks and nature reserves in our country. The first is the Puerto Princesa Subterranean River National Park, which located in Palawan. It is not just one of the top 10 national parks in the Philippines, but it is also one of the famous World Heritage Centers as named by the UNESCO and one of the new wonders of nature. The second is the Biak na Bato National Park, which located in Bulacan. The third is the Aurora Memorial National Park, which located in Aurora. Next is the Mount Iglit Baco National Park, and it is located in Mindoro. This park has an astonishing range of trees that are rare in other regions. Next, the Bataan National Park, which located in Bataan. There are markers and shrines all over the area to remember the valiant soldiers who fought the Japanese army during the World War II. Next is the Kalawit Safari Park, which located in Busuanga, Palawan. This safari park is a renowned game reserve and wildlife sanctuary in the Philippines, from an array of flora to a diverse fauna, and this park is most popular for being home to hundreds of giraffes. Next is the Caramoan Peninsula National Park, which located in Bicol. The Caramoan Peninsula is one of the best national parks in the Philippines, with its superb limestones, smooth white sandy beaches, and glistening rivers. Next is the Minalungao National Park, and it is located in the Nueva Ecija. Fuyut Springs National Park, located in Isabela. The next is the Libmanan Caves National Park in Camarines Sur. Next, the Mount Pulag, which located in the borders between the provinces of Benguet, Ifugao, and Nueva Vizcaya. Mount Pulag is the highest peak in Luzon and the highest mountain in the Philippines. It has a large diversity of flora and fauna, many of which are endemic to the mountain. At lower elevations, the mountainside has a mossy forest filled with fog and full of ferns, lichens, and moss. Below this is the pine forest growing on barren, rocky slopes. Falls, rivers, and small lakes mark the area. Next is the Humalan Butterfly Sanctuary, which located in Cebu City. This sanctuary is a quiet unique in a way that it does not sport any enclosure and it let the butterflies fly freely in the area. More than 55 species of butterflies can be seen in the sanctuary along with a range of plants which serve as their food. It also offers a very interesting art gallery and museum. La Mesa Watershed and Eco Park, which located in Quezon City. Sohoton Natural Bridge National Park, which located in Samar. It was established to protect the natural limestone structures with its surrounding fauna and wildlife. The national park is filled with lush jungle pristine waterfalls, the vivid river, and numerous limestone caves. Next is the Mount Puro Nature Reserve, which located in Antipolo. Now, let us jump in the nature reserves in the world that is dedicated in preserving the endangered species. Nature reserves provide a healthy and protected habitat for many threatened and endangered species in order to help increase their population. Endangered species are often kept in reserves away from the hunters who brought them close to extinction. In the United States, numerous wildlife refuges have served this purpose, especially with respect to birds. Nature reserves are also numerous in Europe, India, Indonesia, and some African countries. Wildlife reserves are essential to protecting our natural world's diverse species of flora and fauna. And here are the nature reserve in the world. First is the Bosque del Apache National Wildlife Refuge in New Mexico. From autumn through early spring, this wildlife reserve is a bird-watching paradise with flocks of snow, geese, and sandhill cranes lifting off in sync from the preserve's giant pond. The second is the Moosehorn National Wildlife Refuge, which located in Maine. It consists of almost 30,000 acres of federally protected lands in eastern Maine. This wildlife reserve contains inspiring views of colorful tree foliage every autumn. Its varied landscape contains a hardwood forest, rolling hills, lakes, and wetlands. On any visit, keep your eyes peeled for wild moose, deer, river otters, American woodcock birds, and a large variety of songbirds. The third is the Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge, which located in Colorado. This 15,000-acre refuge is located just northeast of Denver and consists of vast prairie, woodland, and wetland habitats. You may spot bison, coyotes, black-tailed prairie dogs, eastern cottontail rabbits, mule deer, bald eagles, various hawk species, and various waterfowl species. The next is the Tugyak National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska. Its 4.7 million acres of land feature numerous types of landscapes, including tundra, lakes, sea cliffs, fast-flowing rivers, marshy lowlands, and more. The Togiak's refuge's stunning scenery was shaped over time by volcanic, tectonic, and glacial activity. In the preserve, you may spot caribou, moose, sea lions, whales, wolves, black bears, brown bears, walruses, emperor geese, and a variety of other waterfowl species. And the last is the Wichita Mountains National Wildlife Refuge in Oklahoma. This scenic refuge contains hiking trails and was one of the earliest refuges in the United States, formed specifically to protect big game animals. Herds of American bison, Rocky Mountain elk, white-tailed deer, and Texas longhorn cattle all graze freely around the preserve, and they are the basis for the refuge's vegetative management. Let us now proceed to the environmental threats of national parks. The first is the illegal logging and mining. Most people enter the parks illegally in search of food, cropland, game animals, and other natural products for their daily survival. Loggers and miners operate illegally in many of the parks. These illegal activities have long been a problem in many parks. Around 1.6 billion people depend on the forest resources for their necessities of life. The authorities must act quickly so that the destruction can be addressed immediately. The second is the invasive species. Invasive species are also one who threatens parks. Invasive species are the non-native organisms that cause harm to the environment, economy, or human health, which have serious impacts on native ecosystems. They disrupt ecological processes, threaten ecosystem integrity, and degrade cultural resources and potentially interfere with visitor experiences in parks. Introduce rats, quagga mussels, gypsy moths, lionfish, as well as feral hogs, goats, and cats are among the more than 300 animals on the park's most wanted list of species to eradicate. The third is the poaching. There are many reasons why humans have for practicing poaching. Poachers tend to come from the communities that live around the parks. These hunters usually are driven to it for financial and survival reasons. They usually come from poverty-ridden communities and need to support their families. They find that by hunting, killing, and selling items such as horns, elephant tusks, and furs, they can provide some financial stability for themselves and those whom depend on them. When it comes to stopping poaching in World Heritage sites that are national parks, the best way to do this is community involvement, both local and international, and legal protection with regularly enforced consequences. And the last, environmental threats, is the park visitors. Park visitors matter economically. However, with the growing number of visitors to these parks, crowding becomes a major problem. The massive amounts of visitors can disturb the breeding cycles of animals and alter their natural behaviors. But there are many different things that can be done to help save and protect these parks, ranging from limiting visitors and vehicles to management, planning, and laws. The most important action is educating tourists in the issues and providing information on what individuals can do to help. I will also discuss on land area occupied by nature reserves around the world. About 12% only of the Earth's land surface is currently protected in nature reserves, parks, wildlife refuges, wilderness, and other regions, either completely or partially. This statistic of 12% is misleading because only 5% of the planet's land is completely protected from potentially damaging human activities. In other words, we have set aside 95% of the planet's surface for human use, with the majority of the remaining land consisting of ice, tundra, or desert places where most people don't wish to dwell. The world needs to do more to effectively protect our most biologically diverse spaces. Protected areas need to be better connected to allow population of animals and plants to mix and spread. Also, the important is ensuring local communities are involved in protection efforts, such governments, businesses, and private conservation organizations. Their support is fundamental to the long-term conservation. So how scientists or ecologists design and connect nature reserves? Natural resources must be sustainably planned, managed, and wisely utilized today and conserved for future generations to come. Landscape ecologists and conservation biologists have formulated concepts and principles that can be used to design and connect nature reserves. Developed for regional landscapes and large protected patches like natural parks and wildlife refuges, they are equally effective at smaller scales. They minimize exposure to natural disturbances such as fires and hurricanes, invading species, and human disturbances from nearby developed areas. When deciding on what reserve size in a particular area, conservation biologists must carefully consider its various ecosystems. In designing and managing nature reserves, conservation biologists call for using the buffer zone concept. This concept has been suggested as one possible solution to safeguard the protected areas, providing an extra layer of protection through sustainability of human activities and environment. Establishing its characteristics is necessary prior to the delineation and management of the zone. One key tool in ensuring the preservation of endangered species is the establishment of habitat corridors, which help mitigate the effects of habitat fragmentation brought on largely by urban development. Habitat corridors provide numerous benefits for plants and animals and can play a critical role for endangered species. Habitat corridors allow movement between isolated populations, promoting increased genetic diversity. They provide food and shelter for a variety of wildlife and help with juvenile dispersal and seasonal migrations. Corridors, on the other hand, might expose a threat to isolated areas by permitting pest species, disease, fire, and exotic species to migrate freely between reserves. Migrating species are also exposed to natural predators, human hunters, and pollution. Corridors can also be expensive to acquire, protect, and manage. The creation of large reserves connected by corridors on an ecoregional scale is the grand goal of many conservation biologists. So how important protecting wilderness in preserving biodiversity? One such requirement is to protect biodiversity as an essential component of the planet's natural capital. It is an extraordinary challenge that will require a better understanding of biodiversity, changes in human behavior and beliefs, and a variety of preservation strategies. Another is to preserve wilderness regions as evolutionary hotspots in the face of largely unpredictably changing environmental conditions. Wilderness, in other words, act as a biodiversity bank and a form of environmental insurance. As a rule of thumb, by putting 10% of land under strict protection and making sustainable use of the cultivated areas, much of the planet's biodiversity will be preserved. Prioritizing the conservation of particularly vulnerable areas as well as to include sufficiently large wilderness area which are left to their own natural devices. Wilderness is likely to have a higher biodiversity value as species have already disappeared from more affected areas. Protecting wilderness is a very important way to preserve biodiversity because its benefits are numerous. More than just a location to camp and hike, the wilderness has a lot to offer. It filters our water and cleans our air. It also serves as a habitat for wildlife and a source of revenue for local communities. Wilderness protection or conservation is normally a better investment for long-term goals of biodiversity preservation. The declaration of a wilderness area protects wildlands from the negative effects, such as pollution and habitat destruction. It also safeguards habitats from logging, mining, oil and gas drilling, road construction, off-road vehicle use, and other forms of development. So before I end my report, I will leave you a quotation: protect nature and you also protect mankind. As Bernard Wismick said in promoting understanding for the conservation of forest, marshland, and threatened species. And that's all for the fourth topic of the chapter 10. Thank you everyone and God bless us all.